Da 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 da. Good evening and welcome to another edition of Taking It Back to the Streets. My name is Andy Michaud and this is episode number 2. If we could just work with me for 1 second. I'm trying to post this on my Facebook page. Let me see if that's a possibility. Copy, Facebook. Let's keep it moving. Paste. I don't see it, Al. Oh well. It'll be on my Facebook page tomorrow for anybody that's watching. But again, my name is Andy Michaud. Thanks a lot for watching the second episode of Taking It Back to the Streets. It's been 22 years since I walked away from the studio, and through the urging of Mike DG Van Carlo, who is the Board of Aldermen president, and he was my guest last week. He urged me to start the show again, and I decided I think it's a good idea because my main focus is to get the Palace Theater opened and operated correctly for the benefit of Waterbury people. And Mike was a great guest because, like I said, he is the Board of Aldermen president, and I really want to thank him for coming on last week. He had I give him a lot of credit because I don't think a lot of people would have sat in that chair to try to defend what is going on at that theater and the mismanagement of that theater. Once again, thanks to Mike. I'd also like to say hello to some friends in Florida. I know the Mulville family, they watched last week. They'll probably see this show again. I know Michael Francesco, he used to have a show down here, Dollars and Cents. He was tuned in. Chris Copasani, who helped me out a lot with the shows over the 10 years that I did do a show. And I know Rick Walters, he tuned in also, and it's great to see that those guys in Florida are able to watch this programming. Being on YouTube, Brass City TV, you could watch it worldwide. I know I have some relatives in Maine on my Facebook page. Hopefully, maybe some of them are watching. In the future, tonight I was supposed to have Raphael Feliciano on this show. He is running for the Board of Aldermen in the 5th District, Hispanic fellow, young fellow, and he helped me out on this show about 25, 30 years ago. He was at Kennedy High School, a young guy, very energetic. He's the type of person that you would listen to and watch, and you'd say, this guy is going to be something someday because he has it in him. You can see those leadership qualities. So I think he's going to be a great addition to the Board of Aldermen. And I think he's going to make some changes in this city. And I hope that when he does come on in the next week or two, we'll get him back on. I know he's homesick, but once we do get him on, I do want to question him about his thoughts about the Palace Theater and the lack of shows at that theater, and see if he could take some of those concerns to the Board of Aldermen and put pressure on the mayor and this administration to do the right thing and open the theater. I think it'd be best because for the last 8 years, I've been posting stories, information about the Palace Theater on my Facebook page. And I think this past year, I was up to about 150 different posts over a 2 to 3 month period. And I realized after last week that there's probably a lot of people out there that really don't understand what the situation is with the theater. And I thought I'd try to explain that tonight. And there's some paperwork that I brought. I'll share with you. In the near future, I'm going to try to show these papers, overlay them on top of the video so you'll be able to read it as I'm explaining it. But back in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, the city of Waterbury was overtaken by the state of Connecticut because it was a financial disaster over here. So they had to step in and bring in some money. And they took the city over, and we had to listen to what they told us to do. And they did bring in some money to the city. They developed Yukon on East Main Street. They helped construct, or they paid for the WAM school, and they spent $28 million for the Palace Theater. The first thing I'd like to discuss is the Waterbury Financial Planning and Assistant Board, Exhibit C, and it explains what the state was doing. And here it says the state of Connecticut has granted or expended approximately $190 million on downtown development projects, City of Waterbury, including the Palace Theater renovation and the construction of new University of Connecticut. Then it goes on. Whereas the Waterbury Financial Planning and Assistant Board recognizes an immediate need to operate the Palace. There was an immediate need in their eyes to operate the Palace, consistent with state and city objectives of making the theater a viable attraction for the arts and entertainment in Waterbury, and to further the purposes of economic, cultural, and educational and community development in the city of Waterbury. It goes on. Whereas further delays in operating the Palace Theater will be harmful to the financial health and viability of the city and its emergence from its current financial crisis. Further, whereas the Waterbury Planning and Assistance Board recognizes part of the Financial Planning and Assistance Board overall financial and oversight objectives for the city under the Special Act, a critical and immediate need to vest management and fundraising responsibilities for the Palace Theater in a nonprofit corporation dedicated exclusively to furthering the objectives of promoting the Palace Theater and arts education for the benefit of city residents and residents of surrounding communities. They said it's an immediate need to vest management. They wanted this theater opened up immediately. They go on. The Waterbury Financial Planning and Assistant Board hereby overrides the action of the Board of Aldermen in August of 2003 that authorizes the city clerk to issue a request for proposals to manage the theater, the Palace Theater, and designates the Palace Theater Group, Inc., a nonprofit entity organized under the subject of the laws of the state of Connecticut to manage and operate the Palace Theater as leasee of such facility. So what that meant was back then Mayor Jarjura, through the guidance of Frank Davino, Mayor Jarjura was listening to Frank Davino back then, and Frank said, let's get a proposal out to find who we could get to manage this theater for us. But the state of Connecticut overrode that. They forced the Palace Theater Group and Frank Tavera upon us. We had no say. They were the ones that were going to run the theater, period. Notwithstanding any charter provision or city ordinance to the contrary, the Waterbury Financial Planning and Assistant Board directs the Board of Aldermen not to submit a question concerning the lease of the Palace Theater to referendum. There was talk back then whether we should have this theater opened up. There was talk about having a referendum. The state overrode that. Directs the board not to submit a question concerning the lease of the Palace Theater to referendum. So we had absolutely no choice on who was going to run this theater. They talk about East Main Street. Then they say, the Board of Education of the City of Waterbury is hereby directed to pay the sum of $250,000 per year to the Palace Theater Group as an annual contribution to the operating expenses of the theater in recognition of the significant use that the magnet school will have of such facility. So again, they were forcing us to give money, $250,000 every year to the Palace Theater to help its operations. So number one, we had no choice who was going to run it. And number two, they were forcing us to give money to the management group. That's what the oversight board did for us. The state, John Rowland, he fixed the theater, and then they forced upon us, this Palace Theater Management Group, to run it. We had no say. Then they had it as part of the agreement with the education side of it, Waterbury Arts Magnet School. I'm not going to read all this, but they talk about all the public high schools will use it for the graduations of their schools at no charge. Well, come to find out, they didn't have any graduations up till 2018, so that was about 14, 15 years of no graduations. And then when I started making noise, myself and Frank Davino, back in 2018, somebody told me that Waterbury Career Academy had a graduation at the Palace Theater, and they had to pay them $5,000, when it clearly states here at no additional charge. Well, the Palace Theater Group, and their leader, Frank Tavera, they got caught. They weren't supposed to charge. So what happened after that? They didn't charge anybody for their graduations. And most of the high schools in the city, I know Crosby, Kennedy, I believe Wilby, Caner Tech, they all graduate now at the Palace Theater, no charge, which is the way it's supposed to be. Then, in the education side, they talk about the events that they want to see at the theater. And they said in the third year of operation that the theater should have at least 30 dates of usage for the magnet school. The year before it was 25 dates. So 25 dates divided by $250,000, which is what the magnet school gave to the Palace Theater Group. So that's $10,000 every time Whams walked into the Palace Theater. That's what the Palace Theater Group got. 25 events or 25 times they walked in it, they paid $10,000 each time. They're supposed to have up to 35 promoters, commercial promoters, up to 35 they should have each year. Then community users. There should be 20 community users each year. That's a part of the agreement from the city side or from the school side. Then we get into the operating agreement. Excuse me. Now, I'll be honest with you. When Mike D.G. Van Carlo was on TV last week, this is what I started off with talking to him about, and he threw me off. The guy threw me off on the language of the theater provisions in the operating agreement. And let's go over them. The Palace Theater Group, this is 4.1, presentation duties under theater provisions. The Palace Theater Group will ensure that a minimum number of events shall be staged or exhibited at the Palace Theater. The foregoing performance standards are minimal goals for each year with respect to theater utilization. It is the intent of the parties to make use of the theater on as many dates as possible, while aspiring to ever-increasing quality of artistic and dramatic endeavor, utilizing local, national, and international artists. So some of the key language here is they're calling the shows events. Then down below, the way the oversight board drew up this agreement, they looked at the number of shows each year through a 3-year prism. So in the end, they wanted 300 performances for 3 years, which averages out to 100 shows. So one year you might have 115 shows, the second year you might have 85, the third year you might have 105, comes out to 305, which meets the minimum standard of 300 over a 3-year period. So the parties intend to establish a 3-year benchmark to determine if Palace Theater Group is presenting an adequate number of performances. So the Oversight Board created a benchmark that the Palace Theater needed to follow to make sure that they were providing the adequate number of shows or performances. Beginning with 2008, 2009, and the next 2 years after, and every year thereafter, the benchmark shall be 300 performances for 3 years. Each year shall commence a new 3-year period. So the last year falls off, the new year is added, and every year you move forward, and the year before falls off. Each year shall commence a new 3-year period. Failure to achieve the benchmark during any 3-year period, including the initial 3-year period, shall be an event of default, unless the Palace Theater Group shall have presented at least 95% of the benchmark number of performances. So they're giving them a little way out. Instead of coming up with 300 shows for 3 years, 300 performances, you could come up with 285, and that will be acceptable. And that's the language of the operating agreement. And this is what I've been talking about with Frank Davino for the last 20 years. God rest his soul. He passed this past February, 88 years old. I've known Frank since 1993. And quite honestly, every one of our conversations over a 32-year period had discussion of the Palace Theater and how the city of Waterbury, its taxpayers and its residents, were getting screwed because they weren't living up to the agreement. The Palace Theater Group was not living up to the agreement, and nobody cared. And quite honestly, I don't think nobody knew or anybody knew other than Frank and I and the people on the inside. The mayors, maybe some of the aldermen back in the day, they knew what was going on, but they didn't do anything about it. So they're supposed to come up with 100 shows a year. I went over the, I did a Freedom of Information back July 2nd, and I wanted to see the number of shows that they were producing each year at the Palace Theater, and I did get it. I got the information after I decided to run for alderman because I thought that maybe that was the only way to get this theater opened for the people was from the inside. So they decided to give me what I was looking for, and that was a listing of all the shows, which I have right here. All their shows for the last 3 years. Last year, they follow the fiscal year in the city, which ends June 30th. So the information I got was a 3-year period. The first, the closest year to today was from July 2023 to June 2024. That year, they did 40 shows on the Palace stage. Not 100, like it says in the operating agreement. They did 40. Total attendance for those shows was 49,970 people, for an average of 1,247 people per show. The Palace Theater holds 2,650 seats. their total attendance per show of 1247 is 47% of the theater capacity. They're operating at 47% capacity. I don't know of any theater, any place that has shows in the state of Connecticut that could stay open at 47% capacity. They're not even at half. How could any place stay open? I go to the Ridgefield Playhouse to see shows. Just about every time, it's either sold out or they're at least 80%. Small Place Infinity Hall in Norfolk and in Hartford, same thing. Every time I go to those places, nearly sold out, if not sold out. Any place you go. I went to the Bridgeport Amphitheater several times over the last few years. Every show was sold out except maybe I saw Styx this past summer. They were probably at 90, 95% capacity. Palace Theater, 47% capacity. The year before, Palace Theater, they did 25 shows in the big stage. Total attendance for that year, 31,203 people went through the doors. Average, almost the same exact as the year before, 1,248, 47% capacity they're operating at. They only did 25 shows, 25% of the amount that there should be doing of 100 shows. They only did 25. The year before that, Palace Theater, they did 38 shows on the big stage. 34,490 people showed up. Average attendance, 907 people. That's 34% capacity of the Palace Theater. Who could operate any kind of venue with such a low attendance and turnout? Who? Nobody except the Palace Theater. Because the Palace Theater, they get free money and they have no expenses, which I'll talk about in a minute. So to make up for their lack of big stage shows, they decided, and this is where Mike D.G. Van Carlo and I were going back and forth, that through Frank Tavera's wisdom, the person that's running the Palace Theater, he's been there for over 20 years. I think he makes about $250,000 a year. He said in the theater provisions, the first paragraph, 4.1, it says events. 4.11, it says performances. So there's a little ambiguity there in Frank's mind. So to him, that meant events didn't mean that you had to have something on the big stage, a show. To him, that meant you could do whatever you wanted. And that's exactly what he did, whatever he wanted. So he'll have a tour of 7, 8 people. That's considered an event, 1 out of 100. They have trivia night, 20, 25 people, same thing. That's an event. They have second act where I know Salim Nujame and some others, they got up, they talked about their lives. They might get 25 to 100 people. That's considered an event to them. And then they had the Poli Room where they have jazz. Same thing, 25, 50 people. Last year, they did a total of 65 of these so-called events through the Poli Room and throughout the Palace Theater. Total attendance for 65 events was 2,774 people. Average attendance, 43 people. That's a total of 1.6% of the total seating of the theater. And they had 65 of these. Instead of real shows, we got little shows, make-believe shows, no shows. Year before that, same thing, 65, average attendance almost the exact same. Year before that, they had 47. 47 events. Total of 2,033 people in attendance for his 47 performances, events, shows, whatever he wanted to call them. 2,000. The theater holds 2,650. That means for his 47 events, that all the people that went to it, you could have filled the theater and it still wouldn't have been 80% full. It's unbelievable. Last year, if you add up all their shows, events, performances, whatever Frank DeVero wanted to call them, they had 105. 40 on the big stage, 65 Poli room and tours and everything else, 105. Total attendance, 52,681. Average attendance, 501. That's 19% of the total seating in the Palace Theater, and that's what they did. And they got away with it. And they've been getting away with it for the last 20 years. This is incredible. The second year, 2 years ago, they averaged 377 people out of 90 events, performances, shows at the Palace Theater. They averaged 377 people. Downtown is dead. Anybody hop in your car, drive by on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, any day of the week you want, and downtown is dead. And the reason it's dead is because the Palace Theater is dark. It's mismanaged, and it's been that way for the last 20 years, and downtown is dead because of it. Just take a ride by. So as I was talking to Mr. DiGiancarlo, we started going over some of these events here. And, here's on June 1st, 2024, immigration stories, 36 people. We had Jazz Brunch on June 16th, 2024. 56 people showed up. Big one. We had trivia, April 25th, 2024. 44 people. We had a tour, April 15th, 2024. 26 people. We had table reading, 54 people. Second act, 26 people. On and on and on. I wrote that, 36 people. This is what's been going on at the Palace Theater for the last 20 years. The mayor knows about this. All the mayors knew about this. Neil O'Leary knew about this. In 2018, after Frank DeVino and I brought this to the attention, the newspaper wrote some stories. And in one story, Neil O'Leary said, if they can't do enough shows, meaning the Palace Theater Group, if they can't do enough shows, we're going to find somebody that can. Well, Neil, it hasn't happened. Nothing has changed. Really, it has gotten worse. And Mayor Pernaruski, I saw him at City Hall. I mentioned that to Mike DiGiancarlo. I saw him in City Hall. I talked to him that I was going to FOI the Palace looking for their shows. He said, what do you want them to do? I said, to have more shows, Mayor. To bring more people downtown. That's what the oversight board said. We got to take the Palace Theater Group for economic development. That's what they wrote. Mayor told me nothing is going to change. Now, the mayor, he was, I believe, one of the first people in the city on the board of the Palace. He might have been the Palace Theater Board president at that time in 2003, 2004. He knows exactly what's going on. Why anybody would not want this theater open to bring people to downtown Waterbury for economic development, prosperity, opening up these empty buildings, bringing restaurants, boutiques, coffee houses to downtown Waterbury. Why they would not want to do that is beyond me. And the reason they didn't want to do that is quite simple. Frank DeVino brought it up years ago, And he hit the nail on the head. He said, Andy, the reason they don't want Waterbury people in there is because it is the theater of the elite. It's not for Waterbury people. It's for the out-of-towners. This is their country club. The Burries, Middlebury, Southbury, Woodbury. That's where Frank Tavera's audience comes from, the Burries. They don't come from Waterbury. They come from those other Burries. And it's very unfortunate. And then you look at the management of the theater, the board. They have about, I think, 21 people on their board. 2/3 of those people live out of town. They don't live in Waterbury. Could you imagine going to Woodbury and they have an arts council in Woodbury or Middlebury or Southbury, and 2/3 of their board is made up from people from Waterbury, not people that live in that town? That's what happened here. This is run by out-of-towners for out-of-towners. And you might say, well, why? They don't want us in there. They don't want Waterbury people in there for several different reasons. A, they look at us as low-income people. Waterbury used to be a blue-collar town. We're a low-income town. Look at the demographics. They don't want us in there. And you look at their shows. There's no shows for the Puerto Rican people, Hispanics in this city. There's no shows for the black community at the Palace Theater. There never is. The attendance at the Palace Theater, all the patrons there are lily white. They're all white people from out of town. That's who goes to that theater. It's not Waterbury people. So if you look at the Hispanic community, they celebrate Three Kings Day. There's a lot of things going on in that community. Don't you think they could have a day or two where they could celebrate Three Kings Day? Why not? The black community, same thing. The Palace Theater Group, Frank Tavera, he can't give the black community in this city one day every February to celebrate Black History Month? Why? Are they racist? Sure looks that way to me. Looks like a bunch of white racists running the Palace Theater Group. Just look at their performance. They have 20 years of shows to prove that they are racist. And I don't like using that word, racist. Everything we're here today is racist. I used to argue with John Murray, who will be a guest next week. John Murray from the Waterbury Observer. He used to tell me everything, there's systemic racism all over the place in Waterbury, hiring this and that, and I disagreed with him most of the time, except when it came to the Palace Theater. You want to see systemic racism in the city of Waterbury? 100 East Main Street, that background, that's where you see systemic racism. They might try to get a black person involved in the theater, Hispanic. I know they got Felix Rodriguez. They pay the guy to take some pictures for him and say, hold them up like a token. Look, we got a Puerto Rican here. We're diverse over here. No, you're not. You're not diverse. Nobody goes in there except rich white people from out of town. Nothing for us. Nothing for the kids in this city. Nothing for the community in this city. They couldn't give the Jews one day a year. Do whatever you want. Fiddler on the Roof, play a movie, an award ceremony, music at night, presentations, nothing. Same thing for the Muslim community. We have a strong Muslim community in this city. Nothing. Nothing for the people of Waterbury. It's all on us to take care of that theater. The Palace Theater, they don't have property insurance on that theater. Why? Because the city of Waterbury owns it. We're self-insured. That's why they don't have property insurance. That's so they don't pay any property insurance. So if the theater burns down today, it's on us, the taxpayers of this city. It's not on the Palace Theater Group. Palace Theater Group is flush with cash. Mike DiGiancarlo kept saying, well, they're very concerned about putting on more shows because they don't want to lose money. Lose money? They're at 40%, 47% capacity, losing money. How could they be making money? Well, the reason they're making money, or they have $5 million in the bank, is because they have no expenses. They don't pay any property tax. They don't pay any rent. There's no lease. They get free money from the Board of Ed, $250,000. I believe they get $300,000 to $500,000 from WAMS. They get a grant from the state of Connecticut, upwards of $1 million. Then they're shaking the can throughout the year, begging for money at fundraisers. Instead of doing their job, they're begging for money. And that's how the theaters run. And then I look at one of their ads on Facebook, and here, where are we here? Hang on, look at one of their ads. And then I look at the staff. We have an executive director, finance officer, finance manager, chief production officer, programs and ticketing officer, chief production officer. It goes on and on and on. They have 30 people that work at the theater. 30 people doing what? We just had a summer of 104 days in a row, June 14th to September 26th, not one show at the Palace Theater, and you got 30 people working there. What are they doing all day? And Mike DiGiancarlo said, well, you know, they're getting ready for the other shows during the year. What shows? There are no shows. A tour of 7 people, 30 people are preparing for that. Their staff is probably more than half of their performances or half of their events at the theater. They have more people on their staff than they have in attendance at half of their events. It doesn't make sense. And that's what's been going on year after year after year at the Palace Theater. And it needs to stop. My question is, what are they going to do about it? Now, Mike DiGiancarlo, great guy, to come over here, fall on the sword for Frank Tavera, fall on the sword for Paul Pernaruski, fall on the sword for Neil O'Leary. For what? Does this make sense to them to leave this theater empty all the time? 104 days in a row in the summer. And the reasoning was, well, Frank tried a few shows in the summer, it didn't work out that well, blah, 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 blah. Nonsense. They want to take the summer off and get paid. They all work from home now. Who could get work like this? I'd love to have a job like that. A no-show job. For what? Who suffers? We do. We've been suffering for the last 20 years. Don't take my word for it. Hop in your car, take a ride down in East Main Street, go around the green and look at all the blight. Look at all the empty storefronts. Look at the type of people you have downtown. Now, I have a friend sitting in a booth who told me that the more shows that you have downtown, the more police presence you have. People feel safer when they see police and they see more people. You go downtown on the night when there's no show, you're going to see the druggies, you're going to see the homeless, you're going to see the panhandlers, and you're going to see the crooks. That's who's downtown on a night like tonight, on a Friday night. But luckily, they do have a show tonight, believe it or not. America's playing. But that's what you see down there. But when you have a show and downtown is full, there's more police. People feel safer when there's police, when they see a large crowd. But we don't do it over here. That theater should be doing 100 shows a year on the main stage, and they should have an average of about 2,000 people per show. That's way, way, way out of Frank Tavera's realm. He couldn't even conceive those numbers. This is way out of his league. 200,000 people. We're getting, from his numbers, 30 to 50,000. We should be doing 200. Now, Mike DJ Van Carlo, he brought up a good point that Frank Tavera told him that the Palace Theater, that economic development-wise, there was a study done, and the study said that the Palace, downtown Waterbury, or the city of Waterbury, they would get an economic gain of about $22 per person the night of a show. $22 per person. You got 2,000 people. That's $44,000 in economic development that came into Waterbury. One show. So I added these numbers up, and over the last 20 years, based on their abysmal attendance, that the city of Waterbury lost out over the last 20 years $60 million in economic development. Why does this make sense to Mayor Pernaruski? Why does he say nothing's going to change? Why are these people protecting Frank Tavera? Why? The guy cannot perform his duty. It's obvious. And the way it's obvious is take a ride by East Main Street any night of the week and see the dark marquee. Why is this allowed? Why is this guy so protected? Why? It's costing every one of us it's costing in the city of Waterbury to have that theater empty. And it's a shame. It's abysmal. And it's got to change. It's going to change. I'm not stopping till it changes. Now, I talked to a Puerto Rican friend recently, Victor Cuevas, and I talked to Victor about this. I said, Victor, we're really getting screwed over here, and I'd like to talk to Raphael and get him on board, and he pretty much agreed. And I said, Vic, they're not listening down at the Palace Theater. They haven't listened in 20 years. They don't care. Just like Dawn Myrano said on her show, what her grandfather taught her when she was a little kid, when you get nothing, you get ugats. And that's what we got with the Palace Theater. We got ugats downtown. Why? Why are they keeping the theater away from the people? So when I spoke to Vic, I said, maybe to get their attention, maybe because people are into protesting these days, what if we had a small protest? I remember years ago, 10 members of the black community protested in front of the Waterbury Republican newspaper because they didn't like the coverage the black community was getting. Jimmy Griffin was there, James Monroe, some other people. I saw these guys there. I pulled over my car and I started marching with them because of what the newspaper was doing to the minorities in the city. And what they did is the same exact thing that the Palace Theater is doing. So I said, what if we had a little protest in front of the Palace Theater? Maybe holding up a placard, open up the palace to the minorities, walk around in a circle, maybe 10 people, 15 people for an hour, walk around, during the day, of course. Let's try to get their attention. Now, if that doesn't work, we just tell Frank Tavera, say, listen, Frank, you're not listening. So maybe we should protest the night of a show. How about that? People are trying to get into the Palace Theater, and there you got a group of people, white, black, Puerto Rican, whomever, protesting, open the palace to Waterbury people in front of the theater the night of a show. Would that get their attention? I think it might. I don't want to see it come to that. This shouldn't be a racial issue, but it is. It is. They do not want the minorities of the city of Waterbury inside that theater. It's been that way since day one. And the way they were able to devise a plan to shut everybody out was Frank Tavera. I heard him on the radio a year and a half ago. He said, I promised Waterbury that I was going to bring Broadway to Waterbury Palace Theater, and I delivered. Well, what he delivered to bring Broadway to the Palace Theater is you had to have a union. So now, whoever wanted to use the Palace Theater, like it says here in the documents, 35 commercial promoters. Well, guess what? To have a cup of tea, you got to start off with 10 grand. And then we'll talk about how we take percentages of your take for the show. 10 grand. So I spoke to Warren Leach in the past. He has the Up Group. He has the Soul Festival in the park, Library Park every year, does a great job. I said, Warren, I said, instead of trying to fundraise throughout the year, how about getting the theater for one night, maybe raise $25,000, $35,000 for your group for the whole year, one night. He told me, starts off at 10 grand. So every group in the city is shut out. It needs to change. How do we change it? Well, it's pretty easy. The first thing we do is we tell Frank Tavera and his 29 employees march into the front of the building and we show them the door. Not because they're bad people, not because we don't like them, because they didn't perform. They didn't do their job. They're supposed to do 100 shows a year for economic development downtown Waterbury. They don't do their job. It's nonsense. So they need to go. The second thing we do is we either form another group or possibly, my buddy Johnny told me, hire an entertainment director, somebody to divvy up the days of the theater. That's a possibility. I like the Oversight Board's plan for the number of shows a year on the stage, and then the community usage, the commercial promoters, the school usage. These numbers make sense to me. I mentioned to Mike DiGiancarlo last week, we bring in Keith Mahler. Now, I don't know how many people out there know Keith Mahler, but Keith Mahler's a businessman. He's been a businessman in Waterbury all his life. He lives in Waterbury. He lives in Overlook, right down the street from me. And he's a concert promoter, Premier Concerts. He's put shows on at the Palace. And his shows either sell out or very close to selling out. He brought in Bob Dylan. He brought David Bryan from Talking Heads. There's a lot of other groups that he brought in, and he hasn't brought in any lately. But we bring him into the picture. And if it was me, I'd say, Keith, here's the calendar. There's 365 days. Take any 100 days you want for shows. And then we charge him the least amount of money we can. Because anybody that knows Keith Mahler knows one thing. He likes to make money. So let's help him make money by putting on shows. What does that look like for Waterbury? Downtown will be mobbed. When he brought David Bryan of the Talking Heads in back in 2018, excuse me, the place was sold out. I got pictures. Lines down the street, down Brook Street, all the way to East Main Street going up to the police station. Economic development. I went, I think a week later, to the Thirsty Goat on Scoville Street, a little bar. I talked to the owner. He said, I've been here for 5 years. This is the busiest night I've ever had. Busiest night I've ever had. You talk to any restaurant in the city of Waterbury and the surrounding area and ask them the night of a show at the Palace Theater, is your business increasing? Every one of them will say yes. Mike DiGiancarlo said yes. So what are we doing about it? This doesn't make any sense. We need somebody like Keith Mahler in there bringing in top quality shows, rock and roll shows, shows for the black community, shows for the Hispanic community, shows for everybody. And as far as community usage, they're supposed to be doing 20 events a year. And I've looked in the past, and what Frank Tavera does is he'll have a fundraiser at a brewery and he'll call it a community event. That's what he's doing. He calls it a community event. How does that make any sense? That's not for the community. I think what they need to do after you give Keith 100 shows, you bring in 7 angels. Say, listen, how many dates a year do you need? 10? 20? I know they do the Halo Awards at the Palace Theater. I think it's for 3 nights. 2,000 people every day, which is unbelievable. And that's what we need. But how many shows is the 7 angels, how many dates would you need? And then you go to the different groups. Now, you don't want to do what Frank Tavera did. 15 people show up, 20 people show up. No, you need a lot of people showing up, 500, 1,000 people minimum. So you go to a Warren Leach. Say, Warren, here's a date. You go to Helen Taylor, who does the Jazz Festival. Helen, here's a day or two out of the year. Put something on at the Palace Theater. You go to the churches. How do you say it again, Al? Zion. Zion Baptist Church. Let them use it. Let them put a gospel performance on with their gospel singers. Invite other gospel groups from around the country to come to Waterbury. Let's have a contest there. How about community usage? How about we have something like American Idol at the Palace Theater with good prizes? So instead of these kids playing on their phones all day, getting high, walking around the streets, joining gangs, maybe they'll be like the Four Seasons standing under a lamppost singing because they want to win the grand prize at the Palace Theater American Idol contest. Why don't we do that at that theater? We could, under the right management. How about a night of Battle of the Bands? I said that years and years ago. My friend Eddie Sanchez, Cross-Eyed Cat, Timmy Maya, different groups from the area. Let's have 2 or 3 of them in a night. Maybe we'll get 700 people there. Do it on a Thursday night. The theater's empty anyway. Why don't we do these things? Well, I know why, but we could be doing these things. How about on a Saturday afternoon? Movie day for the kids. Bring the kids in, charge them $1 a head, come on in. You get 500 kids watching a movie on a Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Waterbury kids, all different races. That could be done, but it's not. It's not done. And something has to change. Mayor Pernaruski, Mayor O'Leary, they need to stop this nonsense and give the Palace Theater back to where it belongs. The people of Waterbury. We've been shut out long enough. We've been shut out long enough. Start bringing acts in that these people of this city will want to go to. I know there's a lot of country people out there. I went to a country show years ago, probably 10 years ago at the Palace Theater, Alison Krauss. I think she had about 2,450 people attendance, a couple hundred shy of a sellout. Country act. Their opening night, they had Lone Star, country act, 20 years ago. Now they have nothing. Ogats, nothing. No country acts, no R&B acts. I saw Earth, Wind & Fire there several years ago. I saw the Doobie Brothers, their rock show several years ago. These could be happening now. This could be happening now, but it's not. What else did we have here? Let me see. Talked about the staff, 30 people, what they're doing all day. Other than collecting checks, God only knows. I have no idea what they're doing. Talked about the operating agreement, the old days. The old days were pretty wild at the Palace Theater. We talked about no minorities. Now, I get it. If you were never invited to someplace and something wasn't taken away from you, you don't miss it. I don't miss a third arm because I was born with two arms. I don't miss a third one because I never had it. Just like the minorities in the city. They never had the opportunity to go in that theater. It was never about them. As I mentioned to Mike DiGiancarlo, Frank Tavera told Jerry Reyes several years ago he didn't want to have the Puerto Ricans come there because they sneak in nips. A lot of people sneak in nips. So what? As long as they're orderly, not creating havoc, not ruining the theater, what's the problem? It's disgusting. And I'm fed up. And it's going to change. How much time we got, Al? 3 minutes? Wow. That show went by, or this show went by quick. Episode number 2. Wasn't sure how I was going to make out. I mean, I haven't talked by myself for an hour in a long time. I do talk to myself in the shower a little bit for about 10, 15 minutes, but not for a complete hour. But this theater is too important not to talk about here in the city of Waterbury. We've been screwed over for so long, and it's going to stop one way or the other. If they need protesters in that front of that street, I know we got an old Kings protest going on the green tomorrow, maybe 500 people. Maybe I could go down there and give them a couple signs and say, listen, could you guys go up the street a little bit and in front of the marquee walk around in a circle for a couple hours just to get the people's attention from inside? Maybe we could do that. But it's going to change for the betterment of this city. Okay, Al, we're about a minute, 2 minutes. I'm running out of things to say here. I know next week I spoke to John Murray from the Water Observer. I said, John, would you like to come in? He said, I'd love to. John Murray has had his pulse on the city of Waterbury since 1993 when he started his newspaper 32 years ago. He helped bring in Alderman by district to this city. He was a very vocal proponent of that. And he's going to be on, and we're going to talk about the palace, and we're going to talk about local politics, and we're going to talk about a lot of other things. And John and I, when we get together and we start rolling with the conversation, it could become pretty entertaining, which should be fun. I know Raphael Feliciano, he couldn't be here tonight because he's got the corona, bad, but he's going to heal. He's going to get better. I'll have him on in the near future. I expect big things from that guy here in the city of Waterbury on the Board of Aldermen, and he's going to turn some heads, and he's got my support. This gringo here is in his corner. Raphael, we got to turn things around. Enough is enough. We've been cheated long enough. Time's up. Time to make a change. So he's going to be on in the future. Some other people, as I mentioned, that I wrote, I'd like to have the police superintendent, Freddie Spagnola, on. I'd like to have the school superintendent, Darren Schwartz, on. Maybe Mayor Pernaruski would like to come on. There's a lot of things that we do agree on. Palace isn't one of them. And I'd like to have him on, and John Murray, as I said. So I do want to thank everybody for watching this program tonight. And we're going to keep on rolling on to the next show, and we're going to keep talking about the palace. And I will talk about other things, of course, but I'm not going to stop talking about the palace till it's done right. And that needs to be done ASAP, as soon as we can, because the city of Waterbury needs it. Downtown needs it, so we don't have to keep buying these vacant buildings, these bad deals. We need to get out of the bad deal business and open up the Palace Theater. All right, folks, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. This has been an enjoyable show. I got a lot of stuff out there. Hopefully, people have a better understanding of the Palace Theater. And we're going to continue this conversation. And once again, I want to thank you all for watching, taking it back to the streets. My name is Ian Michaud.